It's gratifying to see something that I value because it impacted me as an undergraduate, back then when it was an MEP program, and to see it now grow into what it is now is really tremendously gratifying, and it is beautiful, and it just fills my heart with hope. It's really what it is.
I'm having this conversation as part of the 10-year anniversary celebration of the IDEA Student Center at UC San Diego. The IDEA Center, where IDEA stands for Inclusion, Diversity, Excellence, and Achievement, is an office within the Jacobs School of Engineering that offers a range of programs for academic and professional enrichment. While it serves all students in the School of Engineering, it has a particular focus on improving the experience and learning outcomes for first-generation, underrepresented, and otherwise disadvantaged students. In particular, the IDEA Center offers summer programs for admitted students, mentorship programs, peer learning communities, academic and professional seminars, and yield events for freshmen and transfer students. These yield events, which include the overnight stay program, also serve to build a community among our first-year students even before they set foot on campus in the fall. We are taking time this year to reflect on the motivations, changes, and challenges of the IDEA Center over its first 10 years. To do that, we're speaking with the founding director, Professor Carlos Coimbra, and current director, Professor Olivia Graeve. We thought it would be appropriate for the future director, me, to moderate the discussion. First, welcome to both of you. I wonder if you could both give your brief bio, where you grew up, and what led you to study engineering, starting with Carlos.
Thanks, Darren. I grew up in Brazil, and my I was fascinated with physics and wanted to do physics and mechanical engineering, and I ended up graduating in both programs as an undergraduate, and went from there to graduate school.
So I grew up in Tijuana, right across the border from San Diego, and I did my undergraduate at UC San Diego because of the geographic proximity. So K-12 in Tijuana, my hometown, and then I went to community college in Chula Vista, Southwestern College, for 2 years. I transferred to UCSD as a structural engineering major. A long time ago, I graduated in 1995 from UCSD. And then I went to do my PhD at UC Davis. And so I did stay in the UC system for all my education. And eventually I came back to UCSD in 2012 as a professor in mechanical and aerospace engineering, which actually had been my department as an undergraduate. I was an undergraduate in the Ames department back then. And
I was on the committee that hired Olivia. So
yes.
I can credit for all the good things that Olivia has ever done for us.
Carlos was actually the representative for the MAE department in the excellence search that ended up hiring me. And so I'm always going to be grateful for that. It was then an opportunity to have discussions and move and transition from basically the founding director, Carlos, who did an amazing job, to then my current position as director. Of course, I continue as faculty in the MAE department. Both of us do. It is an additional administrative role that we've had and that we enjoy very much.
Mm-hmm. So from your bios, one of the similarities is that you're both immigrants to the US. And I wonder if that might give you a special perspective on being an outsider, since many of the students served by the IDEA Center are first gen and thus have difficulty sometimes finding a community at the university.
Yeah, one thing that I never forget is one of the first meetings we had with the first cohort of IDEA scholars. I asked them, it was even before they were accepted, if I'm not mistaken. I asked, who is here for the first time stepping on a campus, on a university campus? And there was a person who raised the hand. This is the first time I ever been to a university. And you can imagine how scary this can be, for a person who has never seen, has never been on a campus, to just arrive, like, decided that you are going to attend that particular university and so on. So my experience is probably different than Olivia in many ways, and I think, like, it builds up, it gives a different perspective. Like, I did not grow up as a minority in my own country. So, like, I went through my undergraduate school years not as a minority. This was not, like, I would say, not as clearly understood, like, at the time that, like, I was in an undergraduate school. Like, I was not part of the general conversation, like, for whatever is good or bad, like, about that.
I mean, I also have the same, I didn't grow up as a minority in my own country, but I went to undergraduate at UC San Diego, as I mentioned already, and I very quickly became part of the Latino student population and became very involved with the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. Of course, we still have a student chapter of SHIP on our campus. They're very active. I was a member as an undergraduate, and that was an experience that I think marked me for forever, that it will continue to define the way that I perceive my service to students at UC San Diego and other places. I was in the student, I was a student leader, and I was a part of the board of the SHIP UCSD chapter. And eventually I became a participant and organizer of many graduate programs at the SHIP national organization. I think it comes from the friendships that I made as a UCSD student, and it also comes from the eventual understanding that I acquired about minorities and Hispanics and African Americans in particular, because I was the slightly larger population that we had at UCSD. And then showing up to graduate school, and basically, while I had a wonderful experience being surrounded by minorities through the minority engineering program that we had at UCSD at that time, that was not the case at UC Davis when I became a graduate student. And so it reinforced for me the commitment that I had for SHIP and for students in general. I love serving as director of the Idea Center. I think that it gives me an outlet that I would not find in other aspects of my job as a professor. And it is based on my own very personal experiences as a woman, as a Latina in engineering, and being surrounded by just, I would say, the right kind of people as my friends when I was a student at UCSD, definitely.
What were the initial goals of the Idea Center when it was founded?
So, I arrived at UCSD in, I would say, July of 2011. And around maybe December of 2011, Frieder, who was then the Dean of Engineering, asked if I would take the role of a founding director of the Idea Student Center. At that time, Terrence Mays was the staff director. And one thing that was very interesting is they had already formulated the idea of the center. Like, this was going on maybe for a year and a half. Like, I remember Tara Javidi was very involved in that. Like, there were several other faculty that came together to help with that, with the center of creating or transforming the student center into the Idea Student Center. What was not clear is what you did after that. So, like, what we knew that we wanted to serve primarily URMs, and we wanted to be a center for all of the engineering students, but, like, to have a mission to improve the retention, make sure that, like, the time to graduation was not affected, that we identified there would be, like, some early intervention if we identified that, like, people were falling behind. And we wanted to concentrate that early intervention in students at risk. And we had to determine that. So there were like a lot of discussions initially with what other center on campus we would partner in terms of assessment. We didn't have the capabilities that Olivia built up over time. The staff was much smaller. Our funding was much smaller. But one thing that I really wanted to do, and that's what I asked Frieder if that would be in line with what he had in mind, was to work on early research inclusion. And that was basically, the idea was like we would identify a cohort of students. All of them had to have at least one at-risk factor, like, like to check on a box. These are students that they were at a higher probability of not finishing the program or dropping out of engineering. And we wanted to look at that cohort of students and create programs for them. A lot of it was just to build a community. And I wanted to take research, like, before they were ready to move into a lab and work with another faculty member. What could we do to keep those students interested and like, connected to the program? And this was mostly based on a program that I was lucky to get involved when I was at the University of Hawaii, that was designed to actually be inclusive of the native Hawaiian population in engineering. So I wanted to do that. And we started with 22 students. Like, these were the inaugural IDEA scholars. We added another, if I'm not mistaken, I think we added another 27 or maybe even 28 in the second year. And my job was to create a project, like an engineering project, that would keep them busy and connected and coming to meetings and so on, so that on top of all the other activities that Jenny and the rest of the staff, like, were keeping them busy, would teach them some research skills that would be valuable for them to get into research labs by the second or third year. So we wanted to build up, and we did that. We actually had, like, 49 students that participated in this smart solar farm project. That we had like a true engineering project with the systems integration, like, and so on. And each one would come with their own ideas, like, and we try to keep them interested, at least until, like, they found something else to do. Like, they didn't know that. They thought that there was like an end result to the project. But luckily, by the end of the second year, the vast majority of them were employed in different labs. I think you took some, Darren, like, like maybe some of them actually end up in your labs. I know some of them are in graduate school at UCSD, others in other UCs. So, and we just got the data the other day, which I remember, like, from the fourth and fifth year, they graduated with a higher GPAs than the average GPA for all the rest of the students in engineering, and they graduated in a shorter time. So I would say that that was the success. Of course, like, after Olivia took over, like, the center now has like a much broader reach, like, much more successful in reaching out to known scholars and so on. So, but that was in my mind, was what I remember most fondly, was like working directly with the students and trying to get them to stay in engineering, which most of them did.
I wonder if you can both speak to there were a couple of high-profile racist events that happened on campus in the late 2000s that were, for example, the Compton Cookout, which was a few years before the founding of the Idea Center. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the university's reaction, how these initiatives were created in the wake of events like the Compton Cookout, and the role that the Idea Center is playing in in repairing some of this damage.
I don't want to speak too much about it, like, because I want to give Olivia some time to talk, but the Idea Student Center was created because of those events. So like that was one of the many demands like from the student community and the faculty that wanted a change. One of them was to create like, a student-centric place so that the students could blossom and it could feel like a feel of community and that would fight against those types of activities.
You know, neither Carlos nor I were at UCSD when the Compton Cookout happened.
Right.
So we don't have the perspective of being embedded into the actual incidents, a series of incidents, because it wasn't just one. The perspective that I have taken and in my activity as a faculty that is newly arrived at UCSD in 2012, which is 2 years after the center was founded. I took the perspective of this continuity that I saw from what used to be in the 90s when we had the minority engineering program to now when I arrived to see this center called the Idea Center, which I love the name, and to say, okay, there is, as with everything in academia and with everything in life, there are these ups and downs with respect to size and perhaps impact. But the way that I see it is like, we had our MEP program in the 90s that served a certain subpopulations of students that were very much at risk. That included me as a Latina in engineering. And then the Idea Center just came out of that long history. It got this push from these terrible incidents that we had on our campus in 2010. And it blossomed into something much, much larger that serves all engineering students. I never saw it as, we are celebrating the 10th year anniversary, don't get me wrong, and I do recognize and value the 10 years of the Idea Center as an Idea Center. But I see it as a long history and a long trajectory of successes in our campus to serve underrepresented students, and then eventually to serve all engineering students, which is what we're doing right now. I guess I hope that I understand the intricacies of what these racist incidents on our campus had as an impact. And I know that it did, because I don't think we would have an Idea Center that is as large and as successful as we currently have it if it hadn't been for those students making requests to improve the situation and give the Idea Center a place in the School of Engineering from some little office, because it did start from something that was coming from what MEP used to be into this small engineering student success center to what then became the Idea Center. And so I think that it's a history of several different things that have impacted, leading us now to the founding in 2010 and to the 10-year anniversary in 2020. I would not want to disconnect the long history of UC San Diego making efforts, sometimes really good, sometimes not quite to the mark, but a long history of doing this for all students and for minority students in particular under some circumstances, like the minority engineering program in the 90s.
So I didn't realize actually before this conversation that the three of us began our association with the Idea Center in a very similar time frame. So Carlos, you were the founding faculty director. I joined the faculty advisory committee in 2012. Olivia came on shortly after as faculty director. We've had a couple of very talented staff directors, including Terrence Mays and Michelle Ferez. And I was actually on the committee that hired her as an assistant professor. I was put on this committee, this very important committee. And then Olivia came on board, and Olivia and Michelle sort of took the center to the next level. So Olivia, what were the center's priorities when you joined as faculty director, and what is it that you wanted to do? What were your big initiatives?
My priorities when I became director and when the Dean Pisano at this point in time asked me to become director were really twofold. The first one is I wanted to, and they're big picture goals here, not specifics of this program or that program. My big goal was, number one, I wanted to make sure that we had programs and services for our students in such a way that our students did not feel like a number. So to show respect and compassion towards our students and a level of understanding that goes above and beyond you're just a student in the classroom. And so we started developing a variety of programs to do that, mostly mentorship type programs that were building on top of the IDEA Scholars program that Carlos built, but now additional programs that supported the mentorship and the compassion efforts towards our students. And so the word compassion is very important to me, and it is embedded in almost everything that the IDEA Center does now. And then my second goal was to develop strategies and programs that would allow us to catch students early and to make sure that they were not falling through the cracks. It obviously is connected to the concept of compassion and to the concept of service towards our students. But now it's a little bit more focused on students that are struggling and what do we need to do to help them succeed. And so several programs that are now functioning have come out of that. And one particular program, which I think to me is like the one program that I just want to leave behind in perfect shape, is the one that's nascent and pilot. And that's our academic achievement program that will fall on you, Darren, now, but it's moving this year and I want to leave it behind in great shape for you. And it is very specific to catching students early and making sure that we give them the tools to succeed through things like our engineering learning communities program, through things like JUMP, which is a mentorship program, these kinds of things.
I just want to emphasize like how far along these things went in 10 years. When we started, there was first of all, like the retention rate was way lower than it is now. Like, there was a much more dire situation for engineering students, which it showed like the success and the impact of the IDEA Student Center to all students in general. We had very, very, very little assessment at that time. Was very difficult to get any data on students or where the students were, like at what time they were like falling off the wagon. All of those things were very difficult at that time. Like just to give you a little example of the difficulties, when I came to UCSD, the grades were actually filled manually. Like so, these were paper grades. And I haven't seen that like for years in many other institutions. Like you had to actually write all the grades. A class with 200 students had to be filled up by like manually and so on. So because of that, you can imagine that like at that time was very difficult. So what Olivia was able to do with the center was not only to make it a much larger scale, impactful part of the School of Engineering, but scale up like all of those different things like assessment, like the statistics. We now understand much better like how the students come in and how they progress to the programs like and so on. And the department also benefit from that because that's how we design the future of the programs.
Yep, absolutely.
And it places additional constraints on hiring too, because you now need to hire staff that have experience in assessment and outcome in education. And those are pretty rare traits.
That's correct.
So we do have, and we did hire somebody like that in the Idea Center. We do have the Director of Strategic Initiatives and Assessment. Her name is Lisa, and she does a wonderful job of putting all of this information together for us, for sure.
So in delineating the responsibilities between the faculty director and the staff, what were your day-to-day responsibilities like versus the responsibilities of the full-time staff?
Well, I think that it starts. I think it has evolved. Let me actually say that it has evolved. Where in the beginning, for me at least, I was very into making all the decisions and building the staff. Everyone that's in the center, with the exception of the Director of Operations, Jenny, right now, everyone is new. Everyone is people that I hired. And so it was both a hiring process and also a training process that required that I be there more than perhaps in other circumstances. But now, especially in this last year, the staff is in great shape. Everyone is functioning beautifully, and I've begun to basically let go, and especially in the last 3 years, but in the last 3 years, giving ownership to the two directors, Director of Operations, Director of Strategic Initiatives. But then in this last year, knowing that they got it going, they understand what they're doing, and it's not, I'm not needed there anymore. And that's actually the perfect job, right? It's like you set up, you build, and then it's like, okay, I think these folks don't need me anymore. I'm ready to move on to something else. And that's great. Don't get me wrong. You know, as new director, Darren, you have to show up to staff meeting once a week, okay?
Mm-hmm.
There will be decisions that you need to make. There will be things that still require your attention. But it's not in the building phase. It's in the moving directions sometimes, but it's great. It's in great shape.
Yeah, it's also good for you, Darren. Like as you would make it the center what you want, like what you are passionate to do about. My experience, I think, was very different than Olivia's, because what I was doing was actually working directly with the students, and there was a problem that was coming that, like, Olivia solved, which was how do you scale this up? So we started necessarily with a small cohort, but I remember that thing came at like a huge price to me personally, because I took a sabbatical to teach a class to the students. So in the end, I was just like throwing my sabbatical credits out, because what I did essentially was to teach more on top of what my regular teaching load, so that I could actually get those students up and running and interested. So all of the students took a class at MAE 198 with me. It was a 3-credit class. We met once a week for 3 hours. And we did this, I think, for 2 quarters to get the program going and so on. So you're gonna have the opportunity, Darren, to take roles as the faculty director that fit not only the maturation stage, as Olivia said, but also your own personal interests of what you want to do.
Yep.
And I have no doubt that the center will continue to evolve as it did since the year one.
I appreciate the vote of confidence from both of you. What do you see as the top priorities, or in the future, say over the next 10 years? What would you like to see emerge from the center?
I can tell you some perspective. I don't know, Olivia, like I don't want to keep interrupting you or
You go
jumping
ahead.
back.
I have my own views on that, but you start because I think we both have views on that. So you go ahead.
Yeah. So one thing, like if you look at this election is very interesting because you actually get to spend some time looking at the country and the issues like and how even different counties like and so on perceive like what are the greatest problems. California is the dead last state in US in the numbers of a population with no high school diploma. And California is the #1 state in the quality of universities. So you see the discrepancy here, like you are talking about a state that has the best public universities in the country, but the highest number of people percentage-wise that
Yeah,
don't
high
have.
school dropouts, right? But
What's that?
high
Yeah,
school dropouts.
it's called exactly. So one thing that it's impossible not like and the role that the UC system has as a social elevator is absolutely critical to the health of the state. But the problem with that, and particularly for a center in engineering, is that you have to go all the way down to like a middle school or even a little bit earlier than middle school if you want to increase the numbers. It is not an exaggeration to say that like it's a matter of national security to improve the numbers, to bring in more people, to educate like those cohorts, like the underrepresented minorities and so on, and to bring them into careers in STEM, because this is what's going to make this country competitive in the long run. So you cannot leave like leaving people behind, and that takes a tremendous amount of effort. Like we have incredible things at this university. Like if you look at the Price School and like how like we know how to make this social elevation. Like UCSD is like always on top of the schools that actually do that. But how do you actually get engineering to be more than just in the School of Engineering? The center is for the School of Engineering, but to serve the population, you actually need to go out and make an impact, like very early on in the educational system. And I would say, like this for me, like at this stage of maturation of the center, this would be something really critical to think. Not necessarily done by the IDEA Student Center, but how do you actually take advantage of the interaction with other centers and with the education program and so on at UCSD with the CREATE and all the other centers that exist on campus.
Yeah, absolutely. Carlos said it, that's exactly right. In terms of a next steps for you, Darren, and priorities, I would say that the continued exploration of how you can collaborate with other units on our campus to get things done in a more efficient way is something that you should keep in mind, and that Jenny actually does very well in terms of making those connections. So partnerships with outside entities to help you in the work of supporting engineering students for sure. An easy one would be a partnership with the Teaching and Learning Commons, which we have. And so how do you do that, and how do you continue to evolve those relationships in the best possible way is number one. I think number two is definitely the outreach that Carlos is referring to. We don't have that kind of full-time person in the IDEA Center, and the question is, what would be the role of that person? How would that work? I think outreach is very important. And then I'd like to add a third one that has to do with supporting our graduate students. So we have a lot of programs for undergraduates, and don't get me wrong, they are important and they continue to be critical for the around 6,000 undergraduates that we have in the School of Engineering. But the graduate students also need support. And so for me, that's the third aspect of what is the next step for the IDEA Center, the support for the grad students, which you have been doing in a tremendous way with the grad talks.
I'm glad this is recorded, because there's so much that I will be taking notes on later. What are your favorite aspects of working with the Idea Center? One of the reasons that I was so interested in this position when it became available and offered to me was that I just derived such energy from working with the students that are associated with the Idea Center programs. They come to the events so full of energy and bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and they just want to suck up as much information as possible. And I always left those events feeling like I could have stayed 3 more hours, and I probably did 80 events like that. And that is what sticks, even more so than the grad talks. And that's what I want to continue to do in a deeper way. And I wonder, what is it about working with the Idea Center that is the most gratifying to you personally?
So, when I get asked this question, I always say, I get asked this question more from the point of view, why do you like being a professor, and why do you then get involved with things like the Idea Center? And my response to that is something you may have heard me say in the past, and that is that my coworkers are always 18 years old. And that comes with a lot of basically sort of notions, right? They're always 18 years old because they're always students and they're always young. And when they're young, they are just so full of hope and so full of energy to make positive impacts in the world. And I like that. I like hearing them talk about how they want to contribute and how they're going to change the world. And I believe them. I know they're going to change the world and make it a better place. So I think that that's really what makes me get up in the morning. And of course, in building the team of the Idea Center to the level that it is now, with the new hires that I did after Carlos stepped down, and in building the relationships among the staff that we now have, it's gratifying to see something that I value because it impacted me as an undergraduate, back then when it was an MEP program, and to see it now grow into what it is now is really tremendously gratifying, and it is beautiful, and it just fills my heart with hope. That's really what it is.
My experience is very similar to you, Darren. Like, of course, like, because I was the chair of the department in the past 3 years, I haven't been that closely involved with the Idea Center. But it's very dangerous to be a friend of Olivia, because she keeps bringing stuff to you for you to do, and it's really funny because, like, we are always, like, flooded with things to do, and trying to keep the head above water. And I get this request from Olivia: can you do this? Can you do this for me? Can you talk to the students? And what is really interesting is exactly like you said, like, when you receive this request, you say, oh, I just don't have the time. But like, then you find, okay, maybe I can do this for 1 hour. And then when you do it, like, you actually wish you could stay longer. Because I think I did since the July 1st, like, since I stepped down as chairman of the MBA department, Olivia asked me to talk with students twice. By the way, one of them was at 6 p.m. On election day. Like, the second talk was at 6 p.m. So I thought nobody was going to show up, because this is when the first 6 p.m. in California. So like, the first results were coming out, and there were like 200 people in the call. This was a call. This was a talk about how to prepare your personal statement or your statement of purpose for
graduate school.
And it's really interesting. Like, you finish that. So again, I started the one during election day saying, maybe we'll do this a little bit shorter because everybody wants to get out. And I end up staying for the full hour, and I wish that I could have like more time to continue to talk with them. So it is really like energizing to talk with the students and to feel their level of interest and how much you can make a difference. Like this is what Olivia was talking about. You do like these are really critical times in the lives of many people. Like not only when they just come on campus, like as undergraduate students, when they are trying to figure out like how to learn how to study, like what's the most effective way to do it. But then later on, like when they are thinking, should I go to graduate school or not? Is there a graduate school for me, and so on? If you can make that little difference, like it changes their lives, like and they themselves will change many other lives. So there is a domino effect, of course, on that.
Right. Absolutely.
And in retrospect, you probably wish that the event went 4 hours on election night.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Yeah, there was no rush, like no reason to election week.
Could you tell me a story of when the Idea Center or your role in it really changed the trajectory of a student for the better? And of course, you can take names out.
Yeah, I have very good memories of the two first cohorts, which are the people that I follow the most closely. The two first cohorts of the IDA scholars, and I of course like I cannot take credit for them going to graduate school or continuing in engineering first, which was the first barrier that we wanted to pass. But I remember a couple of times that the students would say something either in a meeting or during our class or during our discussions, like our project discussions, that I realized like they don't even know it, but like they got this now, like so the difference between like what they were saying 6 months ago and what they are saying right now is like they are in completely different universe. Like there was that step up, like and I heard like for example was very one thing that I never forgot, like one of the original students, the founding scholars, they this person who you know very well, like both of you I think know her very well, went on to talk to a new cohort of students, and her speech was like every single thing you learn in this class, the class that I was teaching, you will use when you go into a lab. So it looks like that none of this is important, but every single thing that you learn here, you will end up like using when you start doing research in a lab. And I think this is the type of like not veiled in any negative way, but like as a veiled like reward that you get like from seeing that like the students themselves like appreciate what they went through, like the effort that was put into it, and they would pass this on to their own students and so on.
Great.
On my side it's been 5 years of being director of the Idea Center. There are so many stories, just one after another. But I suppose one that I want to mention, as you asked this question, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, which one of the many? I really felt appreciated and felt really satisfied in an extremely positive way with the outcome of the founding of OSTEM. Chip and Nesby and Sui had been around since I was an undergraduate at UCSD. There hadn't been any new diversity student orgs that had been founded since then. WIC was in CSE, and that they eventually came under the fold of the Idea Center because I asked, and it's like, what is going on with WIC? Let them come over here. But then I was like, how are we serving our LGBT students, for example? And there was nothing. I mean, don't get me wrong, the LGBT Center does a tremendous job for the whole campus. But in engineering, it's like, what is going on here? So that effort and then connecting with some of the faculty in the School of Engineering that are out and that would be interested in bringing them together, and then founding OSTEM, that was and what I consider not one of the biggest programs I ever did. I mean, I founded programs in the Idea Center that are much larger. It's not the number of students here, but it is the level of gratefulness that I have seen from the OSTEM students that just brings a tear to my eye from the very first day. And they were so amazingly organized. I mean, I couldn't believe it. In 3 weeks, they had a Facebook page up and running. There was a need for this. There was definitely a need. And then they were just so sweet and so grateful that somebody actually paid attention and started an OSTEM chapter. And then we did that, and it's like, okay, now a couple of faculty members can take it over. And, you know, day 2, a faculty member in nanoengineering took over as the advisor, and OSTEM is off and running, and it's wonderful. I remember going to their very first, one of their very first GBMs, the general body meetings is what students call them, are GBMs. And it was at the LGBT Center. I'd never walked into that center before, if you can believe that. It had just never happened. And I walk in, and it's like, this is great. There's a meeting room. Awesome. Let's have a meeting. And it's just the words. It's their capacity to express such gratefulness and happiness, and the capacity to think forward about what they were going to do with their chapter, now that they had one. That was really satisfying to me. On a smaller scale, I would say, because like I said, it's not one of the larger programs, right? Mm-hmm. But on a smaller scale, it's one of those little things that I add to my resume as something very important. It's like, it came to me, and I'm like, okay, I started the OSTEM chapter at UCSD, and that was amazing. And obviously now they're great. They're amazing.
Fantastic. I have one more question as we're coming up on an hour. What advice would you give faculty, staff, administration from other universities who might want to start something like the Idea Center?
So one is that you don't necessarily need a gigantic amount of money to do something. I am a big believer that if you need something, you should just start it, and start it small if you don't have $5 million to get something gigantic off the ground. One does not need to wait for the big gigantic donor or for a gigantic commitment from the campus administration to get something started. You don't have enough funding, you don't have enough support, you don't, whatever, baby steps. Start small, it will flourish like a wonderful tree eventually. I hold this belief not just with respect to the way that the Idea Center was founded, because again, it was founded with a commitment from the Dean, Frieder Seibli, for sure, and with Carlos's commitment and others. But it wasn't founded with a gigantic millions of dollars budget, that's for sure.
Yeah, I can attest to that.
Yes, right.
It was not. So,
well, compassion is free.
Yes.
And I run other programs that are not associated with the Idea Center, which I also started very small, just 5 students, and then it just sort of grows because there's the need for them. So there's a recognition of a need that eventually will get this to grow, and there's also the level of impact that it eventually has, so that everyone is on board saying, this is having an impact. We need to grow it. We now need to put the budget into this. We need to put staff, and we need to serve more students, which is of course what eventually happened. That to me is the transition from a small MEP program to an Idea Center program, which is now established and serves everyone, right?
Yeah, I would agree with Olivia completely. Like, in fact, you can start with a small, even a small impact, and if you document the impact correctly, like, if you have positive stories to tell, even with a very small budget, you can make a difference. And remember, you are making it may look like that is a small impact comparing to 6,000-7,000 students, but it's having a huge impact on the lives of those few students that are actually being served by whatever program you are developing. So I would say that that's probably one of the best advice you can tell people, is not to wait for a big donation or for a big commitment from the university. Like, start doing what you think is right, and when the results come, it's much easier to justify growing and reaching out to more people.
Yep. That's how I started the Enlace program. Didn't tell anybody, started with 5 students. Now it's gigantic.
And by the way, I always tell this story, like Olivia, like almost anywhere I go, if I'm talking to people in general, like that, there is nothing more satisfying when, I think with the first year of your Enlace program, I took 2 students, 2 female students, like high school students, to work in my lab. And when they came in, I asked, what do you want to do with your life? And they, I don't know, like, they were not even sure they wanted to go to college. Like, that's, and anyway, we went to the program and so on, like, and I got them to work with 2 graduate students, like, and they were like, like participating in the meetings every week. And by the end of, I don't know how many weeks, 8 weeks or something like that.
7. Yeah,
7 weeks. I asked them, what do you want to do with your lives? Like, and they said, like, we want to go to graduate school.
of course. That's
the
purpose of the program.
And I think this was such a great, like, outcome, like, and if you think about it, like, even if they don't end up going to graduate school, now college became like an obligation. And that's what you want, like, you want to make sure that, like, that you can build up on those.
Yep. And I think, Darren, and going back to what you asked about priorities, this kind of conversation now goes back to the outreach part of it, right? The outreach to high schools, the outreach to middle schools, that I think you need to keep in mind.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you so much for your time and your insights. And I think this conversation will be a great document for future success of the IDEA Student Center. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you. And by the way, I just want to say, you're going to do fantastic, Darren. Like,
yes. Thanks. Appreciate that.